Hello viewers, Would-Be Ben here with something completely different. Most of you know me from my how-to videos where I show you how to take on various home and vehicle projects. Well, this is also a how-to video, but instead of a household appliance or vehicle, what we're going to look at today is America's immigration crisis. America is in the midst of an immigration crisis. The news is full of stories of hordes flooding across the southern border. Politicians blame each other. Presidential administrations and Congress have failed to enact any meaningful reforms. In part, this is because it is politically expedient to have an issue that can provoke outrage and create engagement. In both the media and in political circles, engagement is a currency as good as gold. But it is hard to argue that if we could find a way to manage immigration, our country would benefit greatly. In an ideal situation, a country with a perfect immigration policy would be able to manage the inflow of immigrants to maintain an optimal population size that is best for the citizens of that country. Problems with immigration include over-rapid growth or decline, and management issues with having undocumented populations living in the shadows. You can't fix these problems by simply building a wall around a country because there's always ways around physical barriers. You can't fix these problems by deporting all undocumented people because at this point there are tens of millions of undocumented people within our country. These undocumented people create a burden because they cannot work legally or pay taxes to cover the costs of support services. While we do have a legal immigration process, it is so poorly funded and understaffed that it really doesn't have a chance to do what it is supposed to do. Immigration hearings should occur within a matter of days or weeks, not years or even decades. These failings of the legal immigration system have incentivized illegal immigration. What we need is a long-term incentive and means to drive new immigrants and even undocumented people within the country illegally to go through the legal immigration process. I propose creating a new immigration status called Irregular Immigrant Status. That would be for anyone within the country who has not gone through the legal immigration process, but who is willing to undergo documentation and registration in exchange for being able to remain in the country and be employed legally. Current undocumented immigrants can only work where there are no requirements for income reporting and taxation. They form a shadow economy based on cash transactions and unregulated work environments. This is bad for both the undocumented immigrants and our country as a whole. Going through documentation and registration would be rewarded with being able to work legally while also being subject to taxation. But they would also receive worker protections associated with coming out of the shadows, like minimum wages and labor laws regulating hours and safe work conditions. They would also receive protections from deportation. What would be key to making this work is to tax all irregular immigrants' earnings so that a portion can fund immigration support and enforcement programs. If, for example, irregular immigrant workers were subject to a 40% flat tax on gross earnings, they would be paying for government services that citizens pay for through federal and state income taxes. A large portion of this 40% flat tax revenue could be earmarked for immigration support and enforcement programs, as well as basic health care on a Medicaid level. This flat tax would be collected upfront by employers as payroll deductions, not unlike citizens have Social Security and Medicare contributions deducted from each paycheck. Since irregular immigrants are not citizens, they would not be eligible for Social Security or Medicare benefits. Over time, this is an incentive for irregular immigrants to become legal immigrants and then subsequently become citizens. Irregular immigrants would not be required to apply to become citizens or apply for other forms of legal immigration work permit programs unless they wish to accrue the benefits associated with those programs, such as more favorable taxation or benefits. But by allowing irregular immigrants to apply to become citizens, gives them a pathway to citizenship that would not short-circuit those who seek legal immigration, because irregular immigrants would be entered into the legal immigration queue at the end of the current line, and they would remain irregular immigrant status until their turn to go through the legal immigration process came up. By having a dedicated funding source for immigration support and enforcement through the 40% flat payroll tax, the country could afford to hire more immigration judges and staff to shorten processing time. There would even be funding to build and maintain physical walls or barriers where it makes sense, and to beef up Border Patrol staffing to a level where they can be much more effective. Once an irregular immigration status is established, deportations of undocumented troublemakers becomes much less controversial. Implementing a 3 strikes clause for maintaining irregular immigrant status would incentivize good behavior and respect of the law, with failures leading to deportation. There are several beauties of this sort of program. The first, it is self-funding. One of the main reasons driving illegal immigration is the desire to work. This gives people a chance to work legally and contribute to their own well-being, as well as improving the country as a whole. We are turning what used to be a burden into an economic resource. Second, it addresses the tens of millions of undocumented people already within our borders, who can come out of the shadows without fear and ultimately have a pathway to citizenship if they so wish. And third, this does not demonize or lay blame on anyone. It just fixes a big problem. I hope there is a future ahead for our country where big problems are solved and not perpetuated for political expediency. This sort of program would not be that difficult to implement because a flat payroll tax is pretty simple, and enrollment is entirely voluntary. But once implemented, it would go a long ways towards eliminating the bad things that go on in the shadows, and would allow for much more stringent control of our borders without the inhumanity we have witnessed in other recent border crackdown incidents. Instead of empty promises to make Mexico pay for a wall, this is a guaranteed method to have those who have crossed those borders to pay for not only the wall, but also for their own ongoing support and management. The time is right for the creation of an irregular immigration program to finally address what is really at the root of our current immigration crisis. If this makes sense to you, I encourage you to like, subscribe, and to share this video with your friends, family, senators, and congressmen. This is Would-Be Ben signing off for now. Bye-bye.